Everybody, I'm Stacy with Stacy's Organizing and Decorating for Life. I'm here to help you organize your thoughts and decorate your perspectives. First off, I want to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving, whatever that looks like at this time. I hope that whether you're able to sit with your family or not, that you're able to share memories and be thankful for Thanksgivings past and to be hopeful for Thanksgivings in the future. On Tuesdays, I ask for Topic Tuesday. On this week, I went to my Facebook page and I got 3 very awesome ideas from 3 very beautiful people. So the first one came from Jessica Campbell. She said, can we talk about COVID, depression, and fear? Which is something that's very real and near to us right now, right? So the second one was brought to me by Charlotte Willingham, and she wanted us to talk about thoughts and how they originate, where they come from, and why do we think the thoughts that we think. So we'll talk about that. And then the third one was from Natalia Lee, and she said, can we talk about reinventing yourself? This isn't the order we're going to talk about this, but these are in right and divine order because it is what we're experiencing, and we can find the solution in this because first off, we're going to talk about thoughts and how they originate and why we come up with the thoughts we think. So then we can understand the fear and depression of what we're going through now with this COVID, something we don't understand. And then we can get into the solution of the adjusting, the adaptation, and the reinventing ourselves. So if you like that that's our topic today, please hit the like and subscribe button below. I may even have a prayer at the end of this video if I'm not too tired and worn out. Because I have to tell you that when I ask for Topic Tuesday, I usually do the videos on Tuesday, and I did, but I accidentally erased the video. So I'm up early this morning trying to redo the video that I did yesterday. So if you'll allow me before we get started, though, I want to remind you that I have a webpage. That webpage is called stacyforlife.com, and on this webpage, I do a monthly blog, which I'm about to do the one for the end of this year, 2020, for December. But I'm going to refer to November's blog sometimes in this video, and that was called Debunking the Idea of a Perfect Life. Again, ideas and thoughts go together, right? So we're going to look at that. But also, there's a description of the services that I provide as a life coach. I deal with addiction, codependency, and grief, but not exclusively to those things, because underneath those things lies a desire for healing and healthy relationships, as well as development of spiritual and soul consciousness. I'm often asked, what type of people do I coach? What's the group, basic. And so the people that I coach aren't basic. It's not one specific group. I start coaching people as young as 17, young men and women who are trying to figure out where they want to be in this life when they're not able to have these social interactions and to feed off of each other, but where they want to be when this is over. So I help them in their practice and development, but not just them, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70-year-olds, when we're going through these transitions and transformations in our lives, and we get to practice and develop and understand where our thoughts come from. That's what I help with. So if you or anybody you know need help in any of those areas, please feel free once again to look me up at stacyforlife.com. So today we're going to start, like I said, with thoughts and how they originate, as Miss Charlotte suggested. So when we're babies, we really aren't having thoughts. Our needs are just taken care of or not. We learn that they're going to be taken care of or we're going to feel the neglect. So that's one thing. And then we learn that we have to use our words. We start learning a certain vocabulary. We start learning sentences, how to get what we want and we need and we desire from where we are at that point in our life. So we learn that, and then we get to learn to feel rejected. We get to hear these words no in our too, and so we get to learn our limits and bounds through learning through our thoughts and words, right? But even that, it extends even so far. We continue to evolve because then we go to school, and our school teachers have thoughts and expectations and teach us things that they feel is imperative that we learn. So we start learning those things and get those things in our mind which fill our thoughts. But even more so than that is oftentimes we're born into families that are caretakers that have a religious belief and background. And so we develop from that too. We practice and develop those religious beliefs and backgrounds. So these things become ingrained. But more subtle then all of that is the fact that we get up in the morning, at least in my generation, and we turned on the TV set. We wanted to be entertained. We wanted to watch comedy because we wanted to feel good before we went to school, and that made us happy to sit and eat our cereal and watch the comedy before we headed off to school. So I watched slapstick comedy. We would watch things like the Three Stooges, Mighty Mouse, and those things, and feel good when we went to school. If we were home in the summer, we got to watch Abbott and Costello. And then when we got home from school, we would watch Batman, Gilligan's Island, Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy, and Dick Van Dyke. And the later it got in the evening, the less interested we were, It was more of our parents' programming. But the thing was when I was a kid, the TV would go off at a certain time. It was off. That's totally different from nowadays when you think about it, because now people are called insomniacs and they're up on the internet and TV all night long, which is something that was just unheard of. I read a book called The Urban Monk, which I'll get to in a few minutes. But first off, I want to say that was, the most subtle. But the most mysterious way that we develop our thoughts is through the DNA. So hear me out, is a lot of people think that we develop our thoughts and our ideas and our personalities and all of this from, just genetics or societal beliefs. But all of those go into the DNA, which would be genetically. But what I mean by that is it's not just like our addictions and our disorders. Some of these thoughts do it. That's the mysterious thing, is that when we talk about, I've referenced lately, the sins of the father. So hear me out before you make a judgment, because I know religiously we're taught the sins of the father are criminal, and TV, the things, but what a sin is really defined as is missing the mark. Missing the mark is simply just making a mistake. So when an adult makes a mistake in their thoughts and belief systems, it can be handed down for generations. Some of it's just through that DNA. Some of it's through transference of anger. You see, because when I talk about those TV shows we watched, when we got to the teenage years, we got the Bundys and the Simpsons was a little bit more dysfunctional that we could relate to in our own families, see? Because when we were little kids and watched Leave It to Beaver and went to school and we were in these abusive families or abusive situations, that we got this transference of anger, we compared our lives with other lives, that my life wasn't like Leave It to Beaver. If I was, if you were in a family that had emotional, physical, or, sexual or some type of abuse, then your family wasn't like Leave It to Beaver. Hence, you go to school and you think that the other kids' families are like Leave It to Beaver, and they're not. Even with the Bundys and the Simpsons, we didn't touch on that because those things are not comical. So when we get into the reality of things, so this is why we say debunking, when I say debunking the perfect life, because these things have gone on for years and years and ages, and we're just now beginning, as this society is healing from these things. So when we look at COVID and the fear and the depression, a lot of stuff is just getting unearthed that were from way back when, maybe from even our birth, so that's where our thoughts come from, is they started coming up from our birth once we entered into this world and this life. But if it passes through DNA, it could be passing through people that are no longer here. So then we get into talking about healing, because when we look at depression and fear, people fear what they don't understand, and we can't understand this COVID. But what we can do is like with all the addictions, see, when we got up and we started watching TV in the morning, that's like something we didn't think about doing. So hence it's like an addiction. It's not something that's mindful and meaningful. So we get up and do that. We've still been conditioned to do that more and more, hence why more people are having insomnia and doing it in the night, because it is an addiction. The Urban Monk speaks about how back in the tribal days, people got up when the sun rose and they did whatever it was that their tribal duties were. Maybe women started fires and lit the fires so that when the men came back with food after hunting, because back in those days they didn't have refrigerators, we didn't have all this processed, pasteurized, and all of this. So they had to cook the food. So they cooked the food, and everybody did their community thing. So it was communities. So they did their community chores, and the farming and stuff like this, and everything else. Then they come together in the evening when the food was prepared, and they ate their dinners and they told stories. Then at nighttime they went to bed, which is when we're supposed to get our regenerated rest, which has a lot to do with our thoughts and our attitudes. Again, what we put into our mind When you're staying up all night looking at the computer, whether it's day or night, you're feeding in algorithms. Those algorithms are going into the computer, but now they're even suggesting that we are living in a matrix, so whatever we're feeding is being regenerated in our minds, bodies, and souls, because they're trying to have that kind of control on us. It has subtly came to us. And I'm not trying to talk about conspiracy theories, because we've done this to ourselves with our not being conscious of what we're doing. So I'm not saying that anybody's trying to do anything to you. We're doing it to ourselves. See, this is where when we get into ownership of our thoughts and our feelings, that things aren't happening to us, they're happening through us. What we do is when we think things are happening to us, we gather evidence of the bad things that continue to happen. And these are things that we need to heal from. They could have been transferred to us. They could have been something that we subjected ourselves to, through the TVs or whatever, that we've distracted ourselves from. Because as we all know, is in addiction, what we do is when we're addicted to something, we keep going back to it and feed in more and more, and it gets unhealthy. And this reduces your immune system when you're living in that depression and fear. Like I say, you might be clinically depressed and need to see a doctor. So I'm not talking about that kind of depression and fear. So if you're feeling like you're hopeless, then you may need to see a doctor. If you want, though, to talk to somebody before you do that, and you don't want to go to the doctor, that's your choice. See, because that's when our thoughts and originate in things. We have to take responsibility for those things. So, as you know, I'm not a doctor, scientist, psychologist, or any of that. I'm just trying to give you valuable, down-to-earth, soul-felt information that you can relate to and understand, offering you different thoughts and perspectives that maybe, you can try to sort your own thoughts out through figuring out which part, did you inherit these belief systems, and that these belief systems caused you this fear and depression. If that was the belief systems, like I say, it could be a chemical balance. So check with your doctor if you think that it could possibly be a chemical imbalance. So when we look at this depression and fear in our immune system, we have that parasympathetic responses, like I said before, flight, fight, and freeze. And that's what feeds that addiction of turning on the TV and everything else, because we are going to keep feeding that or running away from that, but not dealing with it. So when we can recognize our thoughts and our feelings and where they come from, like we just described, then we can get to the other side. So that's where the polarities come in, because if you can feel depression and fear, then you can also feel love, and the other side of depression is happiness. So you wouldn't be able to feel one without the other, because you wouldn't be depressed if you didn't think you were supposed to be happy. And you wouldn't be in fear if you didn't, have something that you loved. So many of us have given up things that we've loved right now, whether it's people. Some of us have given up people, hence grief. So I like to think when we get into the DNA, that even that is an extension. I can totally believe that. So if you'll hear me out just a minute. In watching TV, these TV programs, because I'm not trying to diss the media at all, we can learn so much. When I watch TV programs, I've watched Unsolved Mysteries before. And you all know the deal, that these families are separated at young ages sometimes. They're split up. But what we find is when they reunite, have that reunited point, in the movie or the program, then we're all excited because we find out that they have all these similarities and all these things in common, that even though they grew up in different houses and didn't get to be with one another, that they still had. So if you can understand that, you can understand the possibility of the DNA going through. So if we understand that, and then we can even expand our thought to the quantum level, is that if everything's happening at one time, past, present, and future, then we have to maybe think, why wouldn't we offer to think, that our healing now can heal those that went ahead of us. Say that if we have children, like I do, who have left us before, we understand that this world is very hard for them, their little souls, and for whatever reason, they come to teach us things and to heal what needed to be healed, because if we're experiencing our grief, the other side of grief is grace. And I'm not saying that we ever heal from this, because a lot of people don't want to be told you're going to heal from this. And we don't want to be told we've got to let go of that person. I don't believe that we have to let go. I'm not telling you that. I'm saying in our healing, what we are doing is we're showing them how to grieve, because they were grieving in this life, maybe from another life, if you can, if this is all going on at the same time. As I believe our babies were in our consciousness before they were born, and I believe they're still in our consciousness after they're here. So when we heal these things that make us feel lost, lack, and all of this, we're showing them how to grieve in the future. So maybe they will, wherever they are now in their life, that we're going to give them peace. It's important for us to find peace, however that looks like in this life. We're only going to find that peace through healing. And we're going to constantly be healing, because we're going to go along peacefully for a while, then something's going to happen, then we're going to be jolted, then we're going to have to reinvent our thoughts once again. So as we reinvent our thoughts, we have to practice and develop, see, because a lot of times people think, well, I'm going to think this, and I know that myself and others, that we intellectually know stuff, but until we feel it on a soul felt level, we don't embody and ingrain it. We keep beating ourselves up with what we know. So then when we get into the practice and development to get in right and divine alignment, and after we've acknowledged what these thoughts are, where they come from, when we were kids, were our needs met, were we neglected, and how did that feel, and how did we, respond to that, and how can we respond differently to that today? We don't have to keep replaying that same old tape over and over, so that we can evolve, and so that the ones that have been hurt before us can be healed, so the ones that will hurt after us can be healed, so that they don't have to feel the things that we felt, that we can evolve and be creative in this process. So we're not supposed to just keep doing the same thing. That's insanity. So when we get in right and divine alignment, we get that soul and ego together. You see that ego is right here. If you're familiar with chakras, the ego is in your solar plexus. Hence, the solar plexus is the light. It's that yellow light, and so our solar plexus is what gives us our will. Our ego gives us our will and our drive to survive. The problem is if we're too far united with our mind, it's not got a clear intention. The intention is selfish, and that's where the ego gets a bad rap, is when people have the selfishness going on with the ego. But when you're aligned with your soul, you have the right and divine intention. So then you're able to put forth that drive. Because if we're too spiritual, then we're just praying about stuff, and we're just hoping it happens, and we're repressing the dark side, that polarity of the self, that depression and that fear. We're acting like I shouldn't have that depression and that fear. And with the shoulds are where the misalignment, where we're not having balance and where we're not having harmony within our soul, is when we're shoulding on ourselves, because we think we're supposed to know and be somewhere that we haven't practiced and developed yet. So in the practice and development, it requires us to come from that soul. So we're not saying, well, I know this, because we can read stuff and know this, but until we practice and develop it, it's not going to be ingrained in us. So we're going to continue to react to things that we've reacted to all along. Does that make sense? So when you get this in alignment, that you set that clear intention. So if your intention is peace, when somebody triggers you, rather than coming from that wound, we have to heal from the inside out, not from the outside in. So when you're coming from that wound, when somebody hurts your feelings, to be able to go within and say, why is this hurting my feelings, and blah, 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 rather than just reacting and saying, they think this about me. Because if you get reactive, then somewhere in your soul, there's something that's not healed. There's something on top of your soul that's keeping you from connecting to your soul, is what I'm saying. That it's not your soul in itself, but your soul is feeling in conflict because you're accepting a truth that isn't yours, because you wouldn't react to that if you understood that you are not what somebody else perceives you to be, that you are what you yourself perceive you to be in your divinity, because you are divine. We all have things that we have to work on. We've all missed the mark. So if we come from ourselves and just our humanness, we feel like we're doing and not achieving what we want, because we haven't aligned ourselves with our intentions and our desires. If you're coming from that spiritual self and you're just praying, but nothing seems to happen, it's because you're not aligned with that ego self, the doing part that is in that right and divine alignment that reminds you of what your purpose is. So what happens is when people forget their purpose and they're just focused on that end goal and it doesn't happen when they want it to, they tend to give up because they think I keep doing this, but it's not happening. See, but then we have to come into the part of not being attached to a time frame, of not being attached to how it's supposed to happen. And people tell you this all the time in spirituality, but it is true that that's where the magic, mystery, and miracles come from, or else they wouldn't even be called that, right? They would be called expectations, right? Because that's where everybody gets foiled up, is expectations. However, what we want is evidence as human beings. I sat with somebody the other day and she was, she said, well, this is happening, this is happening. And so she had a continued expectation that this was going to keep happening. So that was her energy, that anytime she made plans for something, she had an expectation. So I had to explain to her, and bring to her mind and that, you had an expectation this, but then I showed up as I'm supposed to, as we had planned to do. So now you can have a different kind of expectation. She was like, you're right. Is now I can, have a different evidence, that really it was evidence rather than an expectation. But the expectations create evidence. And what we do is in our expectations, we look for evidence to fuel those expectations. So she was fueling evidence of expectations of things not happening as she wanted it to, but then we fulfilled the expectation or the desire that she had, so then she was able to have another, evidence of something else happening. And that's what we have to do, is gather evidence of something else happening. But in our thoughts, sometimes we're triggered to gather evidence to support our cause of not feeling good enough. So when we get in right and divine alignment and we remember our intentions, we remember our purpose. And even we can continue to keep filling our purpose with our humanness and our humanity. You see, another couple of people that I dealt with this week, I'm so grateful for you all, is that one person she expressed her words to me, and her words were so beautifully put that I told her, you would write beautiful cards. I have another person that I'm working with that she's artistic, that she's able to put expression and beauty into things. So just imagine in humanity, I think that's what we're all designed to do, is to bring out the beauty in each other rather than the ugliness in each other. But sometimes we bring out the ugliness, and that's okay, but we have to understand and not react, and understand that ugliness is being brought up to the light for it to be healed, rather than for us to keep acting in insanity and addiction of whatever feeling. Because sometimes we're addicted to certain feelings, of having that expectation and evidence of things that make us feel bad about ourselves. So we're all supposed to come together, I think, in this divine time. See, some people consider that heaven, that people all come together and are happy and joyous, but we can practice and develop that here and now if we choose to bring peace and harmony into our lives. Peace and harmony are not something that we just, we are gifted it, but we're not gifted it, because we have to bring a consciousness and thoughts towards that and an awareness, you see. Because we have it all along, but some of us don't realize it because we're collecting evidence of all the wrong. How about that? Every once in a while I decide I've got to make a rhyme and throw that in. But so I hope that you understand where all of this is coming from. That things aren't happening to us, but happening through us. And then as we practice and evolve and develop, we understand that they're actually happening for us, for our evolvement and development and practice. So as we adjust and we adapt and we reinvent ourselves, our friends have told us, just like I told those ladies, you have beautiful art, you can create cards. You have beautiful words, you can create cards. That we have these gifts. Cards are not a part of gift giving, right? We have these gifts that we can give that don't cost anything. So at this season, this time, our healing of ourself can bring a gift to our DNA. It can bring a gift to our thoughts, our future thoughts. And how we express ourselves. And how we express ourselves is realizing, like Charlotte said, where our words are coming from. Our words create our thoughts as we create those sentences, and we react to those things and we respond to those things. That we can change it. If we can see one thing, If we can see depression and fear, we can see another thing, that we can see love and we can see happiness. And then we can go on to the adjusting and adaptation of what it is that we clearly want to see, from being able to see the depression and fear, seeing that we do want to see the love and happiness, then practice and develop what we need to be able to reinvent ourselves and get ourselves there, because those people that love and care about us have told us what our gifts are. They've told us this. And we make it harder by trying to be too much in the mental self, that ego, and not being in that right and divine alignment. So no, it has to be harder than this, And then the spiritual self that will be like, no, I'm praying about it. But it's like that helicopter thing, where you're standing on the roof praying, and then God brings you this and that and the other, but yet you're not open to accept that. When we process our thoughts and feelings, it brings us to be more open and accepting of the goodness that can come. So now I'm about to ask you to pray to whoever you perceive your higher power, your God to be. And when we give into fears, when you're practicing more fear than faith, you're allowing that fear to be your God. I had a plaque that used to say that worry ends where faith begins. So oftentimes we've been taught to worry when we look at our thoughts. We've been taught that a concern is supposed to be a worry, and that we're supposed to repeat it over and over as we think about somebody. But what if we prayed for somebody over and over when we thought about them, and we were concerned? Because a concern to me seems to stop with just, I'm concerned about this. When I've had people tell me they're worried about something, they've repeated it over and over, so they keep carrying it. And a worry is something that you're not giving to God. A concern is something that we give to God, or a more powerful force than ourselves. If you have a problem with this powerful force, remember that when you go to sleep, your organs are still functioning. You're still breathing. You're still responding. Even if you don't want to live, you're living. And that's because you have a life force. So even if you don't believe in God, you can pray to this life force to help you see things and think things more differently, that's going to expand your immune system and help your immune system be more, productive, and help your cells to be able to withstand things that we don't foresee, and help your DNA to create a better reality for those that have passed and those still yet to come. So I pray that this is able to help you. So if you will, please get comfortable. Take some deep breaths in and out. We come to you this time, God, in a time where people will talk about gift giving. And we're talking about God, whoever you perceive him or her to be. Father, Mother, God, Source, the All, the I Am. Divine intelligence, cosmic consciousness, whatever you choose to call this living form in your body, that I think extends with our souls. And I think that's why our souls are divinely connected, that we are meant to be a part of humanity. We're learning through this isolation and not being able to be in contact with people, that's where a lot of fear and depression comes from. So we take this time to pray, to be able to reach out in the way that we can reach out at this time. And we commit to raising our immune system through prayer, through meditation, through making it a conscious effort to, instead of feeding the fears, to feed the faith. So we start with feeding the faith through this prayer. So we sit and be quiet. We hear and feel that breath come out, that so many people, we understand and acknowledge that people are having a hard time breathing right now. And we pray and we lift them up. We pray for their right and perfect healing, whatever that looks like. We know that it's between them and God, that their relationships are between them and their higher power, that our thoughts of how somebody else's relationship with their higher powers should be are not our business. That we are all uniquely and divine. While one person has a gift and talent of one thing, another has a gift and talent of another thing, and that they were all given within their life force, their energy, their awareness. Maybe it came through their genetics, DNA. Maybe it came through their societal, their learning, and their education. We don't know how it came, but it's a true talent and a gift. And so we allow others to express their talents and gifts and thoughts and perspectives while we examine our own. We look back at past challenges and see how far we are and how much we've grown. And we acknowledge that we couldn't have maybe done that without that challenge. The need wouldn't have come around, as is with this challenge, is it's the biggest challenge that many of us have come upon. But it doesn't mean that we're going to fail. And we'll fail in many different areas. We'll miss the mark, but that it's okay, that we can adjust, adapt, and reinvent ourselves. So we take some deep positive breaths. Breathe in and breathe out. We choose to feed the algorithms in our mind rather than being up on the internet all night. We choose to focus on positive things. We choose to get our rest. We choose to sleep when we're tired. We choose to eat when we're hungry. We choose to pay attention to ourselves and our souls, to be right and divinely aligned so that we're doing things mindfully. That we examine our thoughts, that we examine our feelings, and that we honor our thoughts and our feelings. That when we become adults, we don't have to deal with neglect. We don't have to neglect ourselves. We don't have to reject ourselves. If we heal ourselves, we learn how to nurture ourselves. So we choose to accept love instead of fear. We choose happiness instead of depression. And we go through that through a peace-filled way to remember that what's on one side is on the other side as well. So we thank you, God, for allowing us this time in this celebration and being able to reflect on our relationships and our gifts, our challenges and our goals. And so we thank you, God, for we know that it is within you that all is well and in control. And so it is. Thank you. So, amen. Maybe you see me on the side of this camera because I'm sitting with my legs crossed instead of sitting over this way. But I want to wish you, again, a very happy Thanksgiving. I want to thank you beautiful people Natalia, Charlotte, and Jessica, who gave me the topic for today. And I hope that it's been able to help others because, as some of us say, there are no others. We are all divinely connected. And that way we can have more compassion for one another if we choose to remember that during this holiday season. So when somebody's being mean to us from their own pain body, we can respond or not respond in a loving way. I know that I've not responded before when someone's been not so nice to me and just sent them love and light. The energy feels better when I choose to send love and light. I'll stop myself. I'll feel the feeling. I'll feel the trigger. It's not to say that I'm, so spiritual that I don't feel the trigger. But I notice that I'm feeling that. And in the moment, I'm able to say, do you want to feel this or do you want to send love and light? The answer to me is always, I'd prefer to send love and light. So I hope that this video has been helpful to you and been able to give you some insight. And I look forward to connecting with you again next week. And until then, I wish you much love and peace. Again, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for your time. I'm very thankful for you. Bye.